Right, so emotions can be incredibly influential. They can dictate every single part of our lives, from our productivity and our bank balances to our relationships with our friends, family, and romantic partners. This is not so much a problem when the feel good emotions have the wheel and everything is going fine. But what do we do when the uncomfortable ones take over and it's all systems down and we're in crisis? This is where emotional regulation comes in. It's a skill that lets us control and direct those uncomfortable and unpleasant emotions. And if you practice it enough, the rough days actually become a lot more manageable. So, how do we begin this journey to emotional regulation and general well being? Well, the first step is actually to develop a strong emotional vocabulary. And to show you what I mean, let me introduce you to Bella Swan. Bella is an 18-year-old whose boyfriend has just broken up with her. Now, he was kind of the center of her whole life, so she obviously feels as though her entire world has ended and nothing will ever be okay ever again. And she doesn't know how to express this pain and anguish that she's feeling. Now, because she doesn't know how to accurately define her feelings, they're just this undistinguished mess inside of her. She can't process any of them, and she basically turns into a zombie for months. Bella's zombie phase is actually backed up by research. Studies have shown that if we can't differentiate an emotion beyond just recognizing that we feel unpleasant or bad, we're much more likely to resort to unhealthy and unfocused coping strategies like binge eating or binge drinking or jumping off a cliff to hear our ex's voice. Yeah, don't do that. Unpleasant emotions like anger, frustration, guilt, and sadness are not just a natural part of being human. They're actually there to tell us something. They're signals that we need something to change. If we can't identify our emotions, we can't ask these questions and figure out what might need to change. So, not only do we choose unfocused coping strategies that fail to make us feel better in the short term, we also can't help ourselves continue to feel better in the long term. Speaking of long term, being able to identify our emotions properly can also improve our long term well being. Here's how. First, it allows you to resolve your emotions. Like I said earlier, emotions are signals that we need to change or stop doing something. Just like the pain you feel when you try to walk on a broken ankle tells you to stop trying to walk on a broken ankle. Once we recognize an emotion, it opens up space for us to consider what's causing it. Feeling anxious might be a valid response to a situation we're in, or it might be a result of our brains massively overthinking this thing. If it's a result of overthinking, just recognizing that we're making the situation out to be much worse than it actually is can help us break the thought patterns that's causing that anxiety. On the other hand, if it is a valid reaction, we can take steps to start to resolve the anxiety and make ourselves feel safer. For example, if Bella had been able to process her feelings of abandonment and loneliness, she would have come to two very important insights. First, Edward didn't leave her because he thought she wasn't good enough. He left because his existence was putting her in danger. So her feeling of abandonment was actually a result of her own insecurity and her attempt to find self-worth in a relationship. Second, she was so wrapped up in her relationship with Edward that she hadn't made any friends. So she didn't have a support structure to lean on when things went sideways. Once she recognized these two things, she could have taken steps to resolve both, like picking up a new hobby and making friends. Being able to identify emotions also helps us identify what makes us feel good. Sometimes we can't control what's happening around us or change what's causing an unpleasant emotion for us. That's why it's also really important for us to know what can trigger pleasant or calming emotions for us. If we can create a collection of activities that we know make us feel rested or excited, we have this awesome storehouse, and we can tap into the knowledge the next time shit hits the fan and we need to make ourselves feel better. For example, if she could identify emotions, Bella would have realized that spending time with Jacob and her father made her feel less lonely and abandoned. She could then have focused her energy on spending more time with these people because they made her feel better, instead of, trying to build a bike so that she could hallucinate her ex's voice. Really, don't do that. It's not just about feeling better in the short term. Identifying emotions also helps us live more meaningful lives. If we're always struggling to manage distress, it can be really hard for us to focus on goals that we find meaningful and fulfilling because our brain is spending so much energy on just managing that unpleasant emotion. Regulating unpleasant emotions frees up mental space for us to pursue feelings like curiosity or interest or passion. This is important because these feelings motivate us to broaden and build and try new intellectual and social activities. If we can identify things that make us feel interested or curious or passionate so that our eyes sparkle, we can add more of those things into our daily lives, which is great for our long-term mental health because that's how we live lives that are meaningful and purposeful to us. So, how do we get better at identifying emotions? There are a couple of strategies that I found helpful on this journey that I've been on to get better at regulating my emotions. And the first is just to use the feelings wheel. The feelings wheel was developed by Gloria Wilcox at the Gottman Institute. I'll leave a link to the PDF below, but it's just this wheel that has a bunch of related emotions clustered together and categorized under various core emotions. And I found it really helpful when I'm feeling a particularly intense or hard to control emotion to just open up that feelings wheel and try to pin down exactly what it is I'm feeling. The second strategy is just to practice, and that's because it's really hard to get a handle on your emotions when they are really intense and out of control. The solution to this is to practice when emotions aren't as intense. I use this app called How We Feel. It just sends me notifications thrice a day to check in and log how I feel. And it has this range of emotional terms that I can choose from, along with little descriptions of how each emotion feels. You don't need an app to do this. For the longest time, I just used pen and paper. The point is to get into the habit of doing this consistently so that it builds that skill. And lastly, mindfulness and meditation. I know it can sometimes feel like everyone's telling you that meditation can fix everything, but in this case, it's actually really, really helpful. And that's because meditation lets us practice creating space between our thought and our emotion and our reaction to it. In fact, research has shown that meditation physically changes our brain structures. And so with enough practice, we can actually get so much better at controlling our emotions even when they are really intense and overwhelming. And lastly, as a bonus, there is significant research to show that reading improves our empathy and our ability to regulate our emotions. I made a whole video about how that works. Check that out here. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time, and I hope you have a well-regulated day. Bye.